The next Google tool we're going to talk about is going to be Google Forms. Now this is going to be a great option for you, especially when you couple it with Google Classroom. That Forms is going to be a great way for you to get formative assessments out of your students, as well as maybe even summative assessments if you're going to make a much larger form. But what we can do is we can come in, and as we select Forms, we're going to click on Blank Quiz. And what this is going to do is it's going to populate our question and answer boxes. So we're going to come in here and we're going to title whatever it might be. So it could be, let's say, the Civil War. If you choose to put it in the description, you can. You don't need to. For the purpose of this, we're just going to leave it blank. And now as I get to my questions, this is where you're going to populate whatever questions you want to have. Now you have quite a few options for the types of questions that you can pick. You can go short answer, you can go paragraph, you can do check boxes. If you're using this for mostly a formative assessment type of assessment, I would say stick mostly with multiple choice or a 1 or 2 word short answer, because I'm going to show you how the form will actually grade itself here in just a bit. Alright, so our Civil War, let's say, who was president during the Civil War? So here's my question. I can go in and say Lincoln, Washington, Jefferson, or Lee. So if I wanted to put those answer choices in, that's all I have to do for my multiple choice. Now what's interesting is if you wanted to add an image or some sort of visual stimuli, you could do that as well into the question choice. So this would be good for if you have, say, charts or graphs, or even, say, a map of a specific area that you might want the students have to identify. You could use that here. For our purposes, we're going to leave it without a picture. Okay, so now I'm going to make this required so that the students can't just simply skip this question. And then from here, we're going to make an answer key. So from here, now I select which answer is correct on this question, and then I'm going to assign my points. So depending upon however many questions I have, we can do it one of 2 ways. Either I can just make it 1 point apiece, and then if I have 5 questions, my score is going to show how many they got correct out of 5. Or if I know I'm going to have 5 questions, I can make it 20 points apiece. Now what's also interesting about this is that if you know you have 5, 6, 7 questions, maybe you have some questions that are more challenging than others. You could actually make them worth more points than, say, an easy question or a straightforward question like this one on who is the president of the Civil War. So for right now, I'm just going to leave it as 20 questions, or 20 points on the question. Then we're going to come back over here. Alright, from there, now we're going to add our next question. So I have some options over here to the side. I can add a title, section, I can add an image, a video, or a section, or a separate page to the quiz. We're going to keep this one pretty basic and just simply add our next question. And say, who was the Southern general in the war? And so again, we're just going to repeat the process like we did previously, and we could say Grant, we could say Lee, we could say McClellan, and then we could also say Sherman. Alright, and so again, we're following the same steps. We're going to make it required. That way, the kids can't even turn the quiz in until that question is answered. Answer key, add the points, and then we're good to go on to the next one. Now, for a quiz on here, I would recommend, and I'll explain why here in just a minute, but I would recommend that you always incorporate at least 3 questions onto any quiz that you give. And that's going to be last name, again required. For this one though, we don't need to put an answer key because it's going to vary from student to student. And also we're not going to give it any points because we don't want the students to get counted off for just putting their name in. Okay, so we're going to do last name. We're going to do first name. Again, short answer, again, required. And then we're going to say period. And now you could do a drop down here if you wanted to. Drop down options, so period 1, period 2, and so forth. Or you could just leave it as short answer again and let the students write those in. Okay, and again, answer key, we're leaving it at 0 points because we don't want it to count off if it varies from student to student. Now, the reason why I say I recommend that you always put these 3 questions in is because what's going to happen is when this test is graded, you actually have the option to export this into a spreadsheet. And what this is going to allow you to do is be able to organize and filter the spreadsheet to make inputting of grades much easier. And I'll show you that here in just a second. So right now I've got my basic quiz set up. What I'm going to do, and I have the options here that I can customize the theme and change the colors if I wanted to. We're not going to. But now I'm going to go into my settings for the quiz. Now notice it gives you the option to collect email addresses. If you want the students to have to put in their email addresses, you can. Response receipts, so allow the students to send themselves a copy of their responses. If you're using this in a quiz setting, you might not necessarily want to use that. So we'll go ahead and take it off. But here, restrict users in Northside ISD and trusted domains. So in other words, the students are going to have to sign in to their Northside accounts in order to get into this form. I'm going to want to limit to 1 response. And then we also have the options to allow the students to edit after submission or see summary charts and text responses. But for a quiz purpose, we're going to leave that blank. Now presentation. This is kind of an interesting option here. First off, we can show progress bar, which would be good for some of your students that may have pacing issues when they're taking assessments. But also, and this is really cool for if you have students that sit in pretty close proximity during class, shuffle question order. And so what that's going to do is the questions that we have put down in our form are going to be randomized, including the period, last name, and first name. All those are going to be randomized. Notice I didn't put question 1, question 2, even though this is technically question 1 and question 2. What will happen when the form is taken is that all of these will be scrambled up. So the students' question 1, they may not get until question 3 or 4. However, in the results, it's still going to register their answer under question 1. So that's a pretty cool option for us to use in the presentation. Lastly, the quizzes tab. We already made it a blank quiz, so this is already turned on. But this is the important part here, that with the quizzes, when do we want to release the grades? Now, you might release it automatically, which in most cases is what you would want. But just in case, if you want to delay when the students see their grade, you can turn the manual review on. And so that would require it to be manually released. So the last part that we're going to see is what happens when the students submit their test. So they get their grade, and I always told my students, if you did not know what your grade was, it means you did not submit it. But after they saw their grade, what they could then do is go in and look at the questions that they missed. You can also have it set up to where the correct answers are shown as well, and the point values. Now oftentimes, because I was using these for formative type assessments, I didn't want them to necessarily know what the correct answer was, I just wanted them to know what their missed question was. So that way they could either come in for a reteach, or they could go about finding out the information that they missed on their own. So usually I take off the correct answers, especially if you're going to give this to multiple classes and you're recording grades. Students could see this and know which answers are correct and pass those along to other students as well. So a little bit of trying to just curb that before it becomes a problem. So I'm going to save, and then once I do that, I can go up and look at and preview the document. And so this is what it would look like, and you notice how it's scrambled up my questions and answers. But let's pretend I go in here and I took it that I'm just like one of the students. I come in and click submit. Now notice I can view my score, and I got a 50 here. I missed 1 out of 2 questions. So with that, now what you'll see is that the responses are going to show up, and this is where you as the teacher can really benefit from a Google form, is because it gives you the breakdown of which questions were actually missed. So in this case, I did really good on the first question, but the second one, obviously there needs to be some reteach going on in there. So I can look at it from an overall summary of the class. I can break it down by questions specifically if I wanted to. So if I'm focusing on specific TEKS or questions. And then lastly, if I'm looking at which specific student I might need to be focusing on, I can see who did what specifically. And I have the option to print these, or the cool thing is I can export them to a spreadsheet. And you notice what comes up here. First period, Terry Childs got a 50 on this quiz. And so this makes inputting grades into TAC a lot easier, because all I have to do is simply split screen TAC on one side, my score column on the other, and I can just go down the row. Remember I talked about filtering. This would allow me the opportunity to filter. So first period, I could filter by period and then by last name, and that's going to put it in the same order as my grade book. So once we have this, then we can go to our classroom, and once I take the quiz, I do also want to name it, because I am going to have to attach it in Classroom if I want to use it that way. But from there, I'm going to go, and then I'm going to pull up my Classroom. Then from here, go to create an assignment, and then I'm going to attach it from my drive. So it is one of the most recent documents that we have, so as this comes up, we should see that it pops up here. And I can simply click, there's my Civil War quiz, add. Okay, I can assign a due date if I wish, but grade importing. This is going to be very important to turn on here, because as it grades itself, it will also import it into the Google Classroom gradebook. So as I come in here, see turned in, import grades if I wish. So if there are students, obviously I have no students in this gradebook, but it would populate here, and it would also come up into my Google Sheets version as well. So it would have my assignment of the quiz if I had students in here, and then it would show up their quiz. So for me in this case, it would be a 50, a 20 out of 40. But with this, hopefully you can see some of the possibilities and some of the ways that this could make grading and student responses and comments much, much easier.